The issue of whether a mediator should be facilitative, sometimes characterized as non-directive or directive, is a perennial issue. It's constantly a question that is raised by people who want to learn about mediation, and I think it also reflects a constant kind of process of reflecting on one's practice as a mediator. So in the early stages of my career, I found myself to be trained more as a facilitative mediator, and it was almost like facilitation. As I grew in my practice and discovered and practice now what many mediators do, a structured form of mediation, rather than a kind of a laissez-faire facilitative approach, I found over the years that as I've gotten involved in, let's say, not necessarily more difficult, but in some cases quite seriously, more lethal conflicts, heavier conflicts, where the parties are embroiled in very significant and serious disputes and conflict, that they indeed often welcome a more directive and structured approach. In some cases, we know that warring factions will look for mediators who do indeed have influence and bring resources to the table, and would often think that someone who's just here merely to help us dialogue is really not going to be that effective. Well, apart from that, my experience is that we're doing more than assisting parties to have a conversation, and they want more than just a kind of a passive approach, an attitude that I will be elicitative and I'll be sympathetic, but that they do look to the mediator to help them move forward, and move forward with some degree of efficiency. Now, there are times when being a facilitator can draw from the parties the kinds of typically unspoken deeper interests and the deeper concerns that they often package as positions and in language that wouldn't reveal the more human dimension of what it is that they're trying to get at. And so there may be a phase or a point in a mediation where it's appropriate to be a little bit more laid back, more facilitative, more attending to the issue of the psychological or emotional climate. This is clearly the case where one of the parties may be alleging, and indeed, has been the victim of some oppressive situation and needs a very gentle hand, but in the context of a process that has structure and deliberation and direction. And so my own personal thinking about this is that to ensure that the parties recognize they're working with a professional, that they're in the hands of someone that hopefully has demonstrated and a reputation of competency, and that they can feel trust in the mediator, I will typically, in the early stages of the formal mediation process, where there are joint sessions, not the meetings privately before those joint sessions, I will tend to be a little bit more chair-like, a little more formal, a little more directive. And then once the pace has been set and the structure is established and the degree of comfort with the safety of the mediation process has been established, then it's easier and it's more appropriate to take a more laid-back approach, if that's the proper word, because you're really helping parties, you're assisting them to negotiate their solution. And in doing that, getting out of the way can often be the greatest assistance that you can do. And you want them to move from being sort of diametrically or adversarially opposed to begin to focus on, you know, what we can do. And the conversation often shifts from being focused on the mediator to the two parties working together, and with your help, they're seeking a solution. And then towards the end of the process, because you want to formalize it, you want perhaps a signed agreement, you want something that is, you know, really quite significant as a record of what they've done, you might become a little more directive, a little more formal, and try to close the mediation.